like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Mr. Joel Sumant. Mr. Joel Sumant is a graduate in economics from Osmania University and post-graduation in international business from Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. Sir has varied experience working with development agencies, government departments, and communities on climate change, adaptation, and mitigation projects. Sir is also a consultant specializing in climate communications and natural resource management, and at the same time working on different development projects linked to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Sir is currently working with Indian Natural Resource Economics and Management Foundation, leading a project to address climate change and water crisis in Nalagonda. He has also worked on developing quite a few academic, technical, and policy documents on climate change and in the water sector. Sir is also a master climate trainer empaneled with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and a member of Climate Reality Leadership Corps. It's a great pleasure introducing Sir. Today, Sir will be presenting on the topic Mitigating Climate Change, the Emerging Phase of Modern Cities. We request Mr. Joel Sumant to address the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the kind introduction. Good morning,
Pleasure.
everyone. Welcome to the session. Today, the weather. So, we from the climate fraternity, whenever we meet or greet, we start with talking about the weather. So that is that is a habit we have. So in Hyderabad today we have beautiful weather, and last 3 days we've been having some rains, and it's a great opportunity to talk to architects. And I want to congratulate your college administration and management for conducting this amazing training and on the theme of design by nature. And this is a very important topic, and it is a very pressing challenge, not in India but globally. And the role of architects is cannot be undermined by any extent, and especially the role of teachers, because this so we are talking about a pandemic situation like coronavirus, and then we have talking about a global financial crisis. But when we're talking about climate change, it is nowhere close to these things, and it is a huge challenge, and it is going to impact each and every one of it. It's not going to impact, we are already facing the impact of it. Countries are losing billions of dollars every year, and there is a great need for teachers to understand climate change, so that because the future generations are going to enter into a totally different atmosphere, where the technologies are going to be different, where the principles and the concepts and the knowledge and the wisdom which we thought was apt might not be relevant anymore. So saying that, let's dive into today's discussion. And I'm going to share my screen, just a moment. Right. Okay. Ma'am, can I get a confirmation if you're able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The screen is visible, sir.
All right. Thank you. Right. So we're going to talk about mitigating climate change. So often when we discuss about climate change, and there are two aspects to it, especially when we talk about climate action. There are the effects of climate change, so how climate change is impacting us and how we are affected. But then how to deal with this challenge, there are two aspects to it. One is adaptation, and the second one is mitigation. And when we talk about adaptation, is climate change is a reality. So no matter what, we are going to face the effects of climate change, right? So what adaptive measures can we take to adapt ourselves, our environment to the changing climate is adaptation. And the second thing is mitigation. How can we reduce the impact of climate change? So this is what we're going to discuss about today. And I'm not going to, so I am assuming that we are all aware of the science of climate, and we can definitely, today we do not have much time, but you can always reach out to me and we can discuss more on the science of climate change and the validity of it. But today we are not going to discuss on that. We are going to focus on how, what are the challenges cities are facing because of climate change, how are cities contributing to climate change, what and how can cities reorient their behavior to mitigate, to reduce the impact of climate change. So first, the first question which comes to mind is why, what is the importance of cities in climate change, and what role do cities have to play in mitigating climate change? So if we see, cities are one of the biggest consumers of our natural resources, and climate change rightly impacts our access and availability of natural resources. So we are about so when I say cities, I include myself and you all also, because we are all people living in cities. And cities, we consume around 75% of the world's natural resources, and we emit about 80% of the global greenhouse gases. So greenhouse gases are what is causing global warming. And these cities are growing by the minute. I won't even say by the day. These cities are expanding by the minute. And anyone who has been in a city for more than 5 years can vouch for that. You have seen, I have been living in Hyderabad for throughout my life for about last 35 years, and I have seen it change beyond recognition over this time. So if I were to look at the city which I saw 5 years or 10 years ago, and even today it's not recognizable. We have the infrastructure is changing, we have people moving into the cities by great numbers. Every week 1.5 million people are added to the urban population, and India's urban population is growing by leaps and bounds. In 2011, the Indian 30% of India was living in cities. Now it is about 40, in by 2030 it is going to be 40%. Right now we are about 35% urban population, and by 2050 we are going to be 50% urban population. India is no more going to be a city, no more going to be a country of villages. You will, the concept of rural India is fast disappearing. If you if any one of you are from districts, and I often keep visiting a lot of districts in Telangana and across India. So even the district headquarters, if you see, they do not represent rural India anymore. They are also becoming urban. Their infrastructure is changing, the amenities, the access, and the spread of natural resources and the natural environment is changing. So more and more people are coming into the urban environment. More and more area is coming into the urban environment, and this environment is contributing more and more to climate change. That is why it becomes important for cities to actively participate and take part in mitigating climate change. So one thing is forests. By adding more forests, we can definitely reduce the effects of climate change through carbon sequestration. But then reducing the consumption and the consumption and production of greenhouse gases in cities is a very, very crucial part in mitigating climate change. So next, what are the sources of greenhouse gases? If you see the sources of greenhouse gases, they would be coal plants, industrial processes, industrial agriculture. So no more agriculture is a natural process. Agriculture is right now an industrial process. We are manufacturing food in farms. Then we have transportation, we have forests burning, oil production, air transportation. And if you look at all these sources of greenhouse gases, they can be broadly put into three categories in an urban context. One is energy. So when we talk about energy, 40% of global CO2 emissions are from electricity generation, and mostly from primarily from thermal electricity. And cities consume almost 65%. That's 2/3 of the power that is generated, and they account for 70% of CO2 emissions. And when we say CO2, we are not talking about all the greenhouse gases. CO2 is the most prominent and the most available greenhouse gases which we are constantly putting into our environment. Next, thermal power generation capacity. When we say thermal power, it includes coal, natural gas, ignite, diesel power plants, and currently India depends on thermal power for almost 62% of its energy needs. So we are right now, our consumption of energy is from a source that is increasingly contributing to climate change and global warming. And to give an estimate of how much energy uh, is trapped into the atmosphere because of global warming, uh, the energy trapped by man-made global warming pollution is now equivalent to exploding 500,000, that is 5 lakh first generation atomic bombs every day. Every day. So this is the amount of energy that is being released into the atmosphere, and this is constantly heating up our planet. The next main contributor in an urban context is transport. So transportation produces roughly 23% of global CO2 emissions. And in transportation, if we see, the biggest contributor is air travel, followed by car, where a single person is traveling. And we see that the amount of traffic, and especially amount of four-wheeler traffic, and even specifically single user four-wheeler traffic is increasing by leaps in our cities. And when we see the per capita emission of CO2 by this thing, by a single car passenger is 171 grams. So transportation is another major challenge area when we look at climate change, and how our cities and this is a cities are contributing by increasing their traffic more and more. So our transportation is increasing. The next segment we are going to look at is waste management. Waste, globally 83% of waste goes into open dumping. Our waste management practices are very scarce. We do not most of the garbage or waste that is produced is going into open landfills. So what happens in these landfills is waste just lies around and gets decomposed. And when waste gets decomposed, it produces even more potent greenhouse gases. So apart from CO2, the most potent greenhouse gas is methane. And whenever something gets decomposed in the natural system, that it produces methane is emitted, and that is more potent, and that actually amounts to about 10%. So waste amounts to about 10% of greenhouse emissions, and most of the waste comes from cities, or at least from urban settings. So I have an interesting definition of waste from WHO. So how does WHO define waste? Waste is not something which has a property or a characteristic. Waste is something which we dispose. So by that definition, waste is what we choose, and what we choose of anything which I choose to dispose becomes waste. If I don't dispose, it's not waste. And one more interesting statistic is 25 to 30% of food that is produced globally goes into waste. And this food produces, when it becomes waste, produces huge amounts of methane gas. So where do these challenges of waste, transportation, and energy consumption, waste production, they all come from? So one way of looking at these challenges is of how we perceive our economy and our economic principles. So we look at our economy in a very linear model. So when we say a linear economy, it has three main components: we take, we make, and we dispose, and we waste. So at the core of this idea is assuming that the earth has infinite resources. So we assume that there is infinite amount of natural resources, there's infinite amount of clean water, there's infinite amount of clean air. So we extract from our assumed infinite resources, we produce, distribute, consume, and then we dispose. And even when we dispose, our assumption is the earth has infinite regenerative capacity, which is not true. The earth cannot recycle how much ever waste we produce, and the earth cannot produce infinite amount of natural resources. So this is this is at the core of our climate change problem, is that the way we look at our economy, we look at it in a linear fashion. We consume, we take, we make, and we dispose. So what is the solution for this? Is to reorient our thinking of our economy. I'm going to show you a short video. So please let me know if the audio is clear. Excuse me, ma'am, is the audio clear?
Yes, sir, it is, sir.
All right, thank you.
Living systems have been around for a few billion years and will be around for many more. In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food, energy is provided by the sun, things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make,
Sir, the audio is not, it's not clear now. So your mic is
muted.
Yeah. The audio is not, we're not able to hear the audio. So your mic is on mute, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. How about now?
No, sir.
Is it clear now?
No, sir. I can hear you now, but I can't hear from the
Okay, I have paused the video.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So sorry for that. Sorry for budget.
resource
Sir, we can hear the audio if your mic is on. Please put your mic on so that we can hear the audio of the.
Compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is, there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
Hello, ma'am. Hello. Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was the audio from the video audible for everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Once the mic was on, it was.
Okay. Right. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that.
No issues, sir.
So what we are looking at is a reorientation of the economic principles. So our previous understanding of economic model was we consume and we dispose. We consume, we extract resources, we consume, but that is not exactly how the earth functions. Everything in the earth, in the biological cycle. So I'm sure you must be understanding what a biological cycle. A biological cycle is a plant grows, then a plant dies, it decomposes, and it goes back into the soil, and it becomes nutrients for a next generation of species. So we call it circle of life, or so any being on in the biological cycle, it consumes from the planet and it again replenishes the planet as resources for another species. So this same model can be put into the economic sense, and that is what we call as a circular economic model. So instead of thinking in a linear economic model, we reorient our perception of consumption and production into a circular model. So in a circular model, we start by designing how products are being designed. Can they be reused? Can they be repaired? Can the components go back to its manufacturer as resources for some other product? So it begins with design and then reduce. So how can production be transformed? How can we reduce our energy consumption? How can we reduce our waste production, then distribution, our supply chains, consumption, how can we make sure that products last longer, products can be repaired. So most of the time, this is our mobiles. We use it for 2 years and then we dispose our mobiles, right? But then there are now companies coming up across Europe, and I haven't seen in India, where mobiles are designed in a way that they can be easily repaired. So if you see the case of our mobiles, our batteries cannot be more and more mobiles these days. You cannot change the batteries; they're inbuilt. So if the battery dies, you got to replace your mobile. You got to throw away your mobile. But instead of that, can there be a design element where the battery can be replaced? Can there be a design element where the screens can be replaced so that the life of the product can be extended? And when, and you cannot have an infinite life for all products. And finally, when they need to be disposed, is there a mechanism where they can be collected and repurposed, where the individual components can be repurposed? So I want to give you an example of so this year 2020 we were supposed to have the Olympics. So had the COVID situation not been there, we would have been through the Olympics right now. The Olympics would have been going on. So for the Olympics, all the medals, the gold medals, the silver medals, and the bronze medals, the metal for the medals was extracted from electronic goods, from disposed electronic goods. So they do have a lot of value and components that can be repurposed. So in a circular economic model, is there scope for collection? And then, how can we extract and reuse these parts? And finally, can they be recycled? So usually when we talk about responsible consumption, we think that recycling is the first part. The recycling is the end part, is the last resort. The first thing is refuse, then we reduce, then we reform, then we repair, then we reuse, then finally we recycle. So this is a circular economy model. So this is not a science, it is not a single concept, but it's a philosophy that can be incorporated into diverse sectors. It can be incorporated into architecture, it can be incorporated into manufacturing, it can be incorporated into agriculture, it can be incorporated into energy production. So we're going to see, so we have discussed some of the challenges in the energy sector, we have discussed about challenges in the transportation sector, we have discussed about challenges in the waste management sector. So next we're going to look at how can we apply these principles of circular economy to improve the situation in these sectors. So firstly, if we look at the energy sector, so dependency on renewable energies. So when we talk about the renewable energies, it can be solar, wind, tidal, energy from tides, geothermal. So places where you have active volcanic action, so there countries extract heat from the Earth's core and use it as electricity. So one example is in Iceland, about 90% of their energy comes from geothermal. And there are some positive signs. We were discussing about the gloom picture of the energy sector, but if you see, a positive sign is that for the first time since 1982, first time in India, the CO2 emissions have come down in 2020. This, and it is not because of the lockdown or the restrictions in travel. This is data from March. So that is even before the lockdown, and that is mainly because of our increasing dependency on renewable energy systems. And India right now is producing about 175 gigawatts of solar energy, of renewable energy. And here's the situation of renewable energy in India. Till 2017, we were producing about just 75 gigawatts. And right now we are producing 175 gigawatts. And by 2030, we have policies and set projects in place so that we can start generating 450 gigawatts of energy. So that is almost about 200 times more than what is our current capacity. So that is going to increase our dependency on renewable sources rather from non-renewable sources. And that is definitely going to decrease the CO2 emissions in especially emerging countries like ours. And one more great initiative in India we have taken right now is the International Solar Alliances. So you have countries which are spread across the equator between the tropics where the sun shines brighter. And India is one of them. You have countries across Brazil, you have Argentina, we have France, European nations, we have other Southeast Asian countries. So these countries, one of their biggest resources is that they have sun energy shining on them almost 250 days of the year or more. So this is a great potential. Now there 121 countries have joined the Solar Alliance, which was initiated by India in 2015 by our Honorable Prime Minister. And these countries are going to share their power and their resources and their technology to make sure that there is greater access to renewable energy. And this is about energy production. So how can we make energy more efficient? Efficiency is also a way by increasing efficiency, we can reduce our energy consumption. So this is one of the principles in circular economy. It's called biomimicry. So the concept of biomimicry is you study nature's model. How does the nature solve and be more efficient in its energy consumption? So a short definition is of biomimicry: study nature's model and emulate these forms, processes, systems, and strategies to solve human problems. I'll give you an example. So if you see, this is a B-52 stealth bomber. So to make sure that the drag is less and make sure that it goes faster and moves faster in higher altitudes, they have adopted the shape of a hawk. The design is from the shape of a hawk. And definitely by mimicking the design from nature, the energy dependency is lesser because the flight is more efficient. If you see this, the symbol of this is a bullet train in Japan. We call it the Shinkansen. And the nose of the bullet train, the biggest challenge of a bullet train was not the speed. It goes at a speed of more than 200 kilometers per hour. So, but when it goes at that speed, it produces something called a sonic boom. So that was reduced by designing its front part in the same as a nose of a kingfisher. So they were able to overcome that design challenge by mimicking the nose of a kingfisher. And over here on the bottom left, if you can see, this is the fin of a whale. This is the fin of a whale. A whale is huge sea mammal, and the size of its fin is much smaller compared to its body. The proportion of the size of its body compared to its fin, it's very different. And even though that being the case, these whales can swim very fast, they can jump out of water, and that is because of these ridges the whale has on its fins. So the same design has been mimicked in designing blades of a windmill. So by mimicking the design of a whale's fin onto the blades of a windmill, these windmills now can turn more faster and are more efficient, and by doing that they can produce more energy. So this is how concepts from uh, circular economy. So this is one of the concepts. There's several concepts in circular economy. I would be sharing the resources with your faculty. So by mimicking this, our energy dependency can be reduced by being more efficient. The next thing is transportation. By increasing our dependency in clean fuel and multimodal transport. So we have a beautiful example of multimodal transport in Hyderabad, our Hyderabad Metro Rail Limited. So where the for last mile connectivity, most of the metro, at least the end points, the metro stations in Nalgonda and Nagol, sorry, in Nagol and Miapur, they have electronic vehicles. They have e-scooters, they have cycles, and the metro stations are now being converted. The roofs of the metro stations are now being lined with solar panels, so that the power to run these metro stations is also renewable energy. The second concept is recycling end of life means of transport. So all transportation vehicles, they have a lifespan. At the end of the lifespan, what happens to the raw materials which goes into making, dismantling to the end of the life. So what this means is, how can we extract materials from these vehicles and repurpose them to make new vehicles. So new vehicles or as resources for metals. And this is not something very new. This has been in our society for a very long time. If you I'm sure we all know our Raddiwala. So they all work on the same principle. They repurpose old end of life products. So once products have ended their purpose, they take them back and then they repurpose it. And third concept in transportation is pooling transport. So we are all familiar with Uber Pool, Ola, Share, and this is a pooling transport for individual transportation. But now companies are looking at how can they optimize their design their supply chain so that even goods can pool. So when containers are moving from shipping yards, they're making sure that they are organized, and the supply chain is designed in such a way that part components moving at the same direction can be taken together instead of going in different transportation modes. So by that way, they are making transportation more efficient. The dependency for energy for transportation is also changing. We are seeing a huge surge of electric vehicles. Our government is planning to phase out all diesel vehicles by 2030. So that is how transportation sector is going to help in mitigating climate change. And mostly the transportation sector is active in supporting our cities or is used in our cities. So if there's an estimate that our urban dependency compared to rural is, the rural dependency on transportation is only a mere 15%. 85% of transportation is to meet the needs of urban population. Next sector is waste management. So in waste management, we have two theories in circular economy. One is called cradle to cradle. Cradle to cradle. That means eliminate the concept of waste. Waste is looked at as resource. Waste is food. So how can we design products and materials with so that their impact on the environment and human health can be reduced, and these products can go back into as resources for another product. So I want to give an example of Michelin tires. So everyone, you must be aware of Michelin tires, right?
Yes.
Michelin tires, they are right now working at annually collecting close to 35,000 metric tons of rubber, so that it can be repurposed into new tires. And these tires, because they are repurposed from already made tires, they are more efficient for as tires. So this is a cradle to cradle concept. And right now in Europe, there is a cradle to cradle certification also for products. In India, Hero Motocorp campus in Jaipur is built on the cradle to cradle concept principle, where there is hardly any resources that go as waste from the campus. Anything that comes into the campus as a resource is purposed and repurposed in one of the departments. So, and consumers globally are being more and more aware of and are environmentally conscious. So one example is, so right now I was just talking about cradle to cradle certification. In Europe, you have brands which are now certified as cradle to cradle gold, cradle to cradle bronze, cradle to cradle silver. This is one concept. And the next one we have is called industrial ecology. One second. Is industrial ecology. Industrial ecology is basically designing of industrial parks in such a way that the byproducts from one process, from one system, from one industrial unit becomes the resource for another industrial process or industrial unit. So one good example is if you have seen the Marriott Hotel in Hyderabad. So the heat which is generated from the kitchen, from the kitchen is trapped and used for the boilers. So the energy consumption in the boilers is less because the already generated heat from the kitchen is being trapped and used to heat the boilers for the laundry. So that is an example. And in many places, you have power plants which produce a lot of gypsum waste. That is, so near a power plant, they're making plaster of Paris industry, so that the gypsum waste which comes from power plants is used as a raw material for the plaster of Paris industry. So this is how you design an industrial or a production system, so that waste need not travel from one place to another. You're reducing the footprint of waste, at the same time making sure that the waste is not waste anymore, but it is a resource for another product. And this principle is called industrial ecology. And next is right. Oops. So we have seen how the circular economy model can be emulated into the sector, energy sector, transportation sector, and waste management sector. And this is, I've just given an example for three sectors uh, in context of mitigating climate change in an urban scenario. These principles can be applied to diverse sectors. This to almost any sectors like agriculture. It can be applied to manufacturing, and it can be applied to housing. It can be applied to developing landscapes. So this is it is not a fixed science, but it's an open science, and these principles right now are being applied to how many of you have heard the term of Green New Deal? Green New Deal. So Green New Deal is a new economic model which is being uh, incorporated in the Europe and in US to reorient their entire economy so that there are new green jobs, and the industries shift from their dependency of fossil fuels to renewable energy. So, and the whole concept of Green New Deal is based on the circular economy. Now, the entire European economy action plan is based on circular economy. So, next we're going to look at our SDGs. So the circular economy, like we were discussing, has promise for achieving multiple sectors, and also for multiple sustainable development goals. So energy, sustainable energy, economic growth, because the entire industry and the economy is shifting to a different paradigm, and on sustainable cities, and sustainable consumption and production, and finally climate action. So I want to just discuss slightly on goal number 12 and 13. So goal number 12 is sustainable consumption and production. In my opinion, what I feel is that more than any other goal, focusing on sustainable responsible consumption and production is key, is very important to achieve climate action, because climate change is not a technology problem, it is not a economic problem, it is a mindset problem. Our assumption and our perception that we can endlessly consume and produce is the main change, is the main reason for the climate crisis which we are right now. And circular economy addresses responsible consumption and production practices. So our earth is not flat and our earth is not linear, so our economy also need not be linear. So I will now open up for questions. So if any one of you have questions, can please unmute, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a few questions from the participants. They have shared with us on a chat box. So on behalf of the participants, we will ask you the questions, sir. So can we start with that?
Sure, ma'am.
So the first question that we have is, to achieve circular economy model, what are the three main modifications that we seek in our space planning and design principles? Do you...
Sure. So one thing is, when you're talking about space planning and designing, so I will be sharing you some of the a document with you, ma'am, so we can share, you can share it with the participant. It is very exhaustive
Okay.
on the circular economy school of thought. So it has it has a lot of different principles. Now, when you are planning buildings, how can you make sure that there is good airflow so that our dependency on air conditions can be reduced? How can we make sure that we have good natural lighting so that our dependency for energy is reduced? If How many of you have seen? I visited Usmania University Arts College campus. So it is more than 100 years old, but it was built on the principles of circular economy. It is built in such a way that throughout the day, irrespective of the season, you will not need irrespective of the season and throughout the day, as long as the sun is there, you will not need a light or a fan in the entire building. So this is how we can emulate the principles of circular economy. So the main idea is, how do we reduce our dependency on external sources? How do we reduce our dependence on external sources for material as well as energy? So if we can start with that frame of mind, then our designs can be reoriented to make sure that our practices are circular and not linear.
Right, sir. Good one, sir. So the next one, this is more about climate change, sir. Will the
Sure.
actions we take today be enough to forestall the direct impacts of climate change, or are we too late, or is it a little too late to do that?
So right now, as per the latest IPCC International Panel on Climate Change, the report is that we have roughly about 12 years of time to make sure that climate change doesn't tip to an irreversible point. So we have about 12 years of time, and if we go in the same path as we are going right now, we will come to a point where climate will change our environment in such a way that it cannot be reversed. So that is a very gloom picture, but there is hope. There is hope because we have overcome such a huge global crisis before through combined planning and action. And that is, if you so we must all have be aware of the ozone crisis in the 90s. So ozone, when the ozone crisis, it was also a similar situation as climate change, but through unified action from all the countries, we were able to avert that situation. So yes, it is very gloom, but there is hope because we have done it before, and that is the optimism which all the global leaders are trying to express.
Okay.
The
Sir,
last question I just wanted to interfere.
Sure.
Actually, they are asking about the three the circular economy principles. The participant should note basically the waste use the waste as a resource is most important, because when you are demolishing the building, when you rebuild it, and it must be reused, and rethink the business models. The business models which supposed to be government of India made a business model of renovating or building the railway stations. Thereby the railway station, if you use a model of UK, you know, the railway stations are business centers. The people will come to the station, both the parties, an interviewer and interviewee, both will come and sit on a table of a coffee table. They both discuss there, and interview complete, and they go back without using another public. Only the mass transport they used, and they don't park it at all, and they didn't use it at all. So that is one. And collaborative to create a giant web. Most of the time, value for money by it is called partnering for performance. So every individual having their own skills. So the design must be in such a way that there must be a collaborative models. There must be something, a space can be multi-used. When you design a space, in the daytime, somebody will run a restaurant. In the nighttime, in the evening, somebody will run a barbecue. And in the next time, it can be a barber center. Then it can be a spa. So it is a collaborative approach, multiple use. Then regenerative resources, prioritize, so it should regenerate, maybe power, maybe renewable energy, maybe you use solar power or windmills, and it will generate the power in itself. Then you should have a preservation methodology whereby the elevation will not be changed, something like you have structures, monumental structures, or you call them as your cultural heritage buildings. So you will not change them in a way that will preserve our culture, and at the same time we are not disturbing at all. So see, it is when you see psychologically you are saying this is a heritage building, we are not touching. So by saying that, we are not at all interfering any modifications of that structure. That is, we are saving a lot of money. Then you use a digital technology whereby the minimal interference is there. People without they must know about the information of a structure, information of the building, information of the construction technology, and use when you walk in, there must be human sensitive lights. When you walk in, they will come up. You don't even switch on and switch off because people don't know where they are. In pandemic time like today's, the corona time, you are scared to touch any wall or any switch and any socket. Now, when you walk in, the lights come, and when you walk out, the lights go. And then there is another key element is design for the future, because this is our common future, and we are the future generations lended the earth to us, they lended the space to us. Now we are our duty to preserve this nature for the future. So that means you must design for the future, not for just for you. So these are the key elements. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Raj Reddy Garu. You have, I think, you have put out some very, very valuable and valuable points, which I am sure the architecture faculty will definitely find it very useful. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your.
Thank you. No. You delivered a great lecture. It's just a supporting.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes.
Right. Joel, sir, coming to the next
Yes.
question. Can you please advise us on the role of primary, secondary, and tertiary recycling in energy efficiency?
For energy efficiency, absolutely, ma'am. So I just want to understand the question. So are you looking for how can energy efficiency be increased in primary and secondary and tertiary recycling?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely, ma'am. Ma'am, I want to share one of my experiences first. So I've been working in the water sector. I've been working in the water sector, and in water sector we use a lot of the STPs consume a lot of energy. The sewage treatment plants are very intensive processes, and they consume a lot of energy. So what we advocate is the usage of bioremediation methods. So how can we use plants and other biological species to remove nutrients from water, that is to clean? So every plant has an affinity for a certain nutrient, right? Every plant has an affinity for certain nutrient. So can we use these plants and plant them in the water, and can the water be treated? So this is called bioremediation. It is used in So when compared to conventional STP technology, this thing is very effective. It can be easily scaled, and its dependency on electricity is absolutely zero, because you're just basically growing plants in water, which will absorb the nutrient. So to give a more specific example, so one of the major contaminants in our urban municipal water drainage water is phosphates and nitrates, because the other organic material is automatically breaks down and is consumed by the natural water system, but then phosphates and nitrates are very difficult to extract from water. So you use plants like vetiver. So we call it it's a plant called vetiver. It's a grass, so it has an affinity to absorb nitrates and phosphates. So by planting these plants in the water through beds, you can definitely clean water. So I can give you an example of how you can use primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment in water sector, because this is where I work in. But whereas when it goes to recycling building materials, I think I'm not the most equipped person to answer that, ma'am. I hope I was able to answer the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Especially
Right.
the example with the water plant to purify the
Yes.
water body. Absolutely. It did,
Right.
sir. So the next question is, given that the renewable sources provide only a small percentage of our energy requirements, and that nuclear power is so expensive, do you think we can be realistic to get completely off our fossil fuels as soon as possible? Is it possible, or it's like, we are still banking a part of it and then we're dependent on them? Do you think we'll be completely off it?
Ma'am, the thing about technology is when we scale it up, the costs come down. The thing about technology is the more you scale it up, the cheaper it becomes. So we have all seen that how mobile phones, the cost of mobile phones have come down, how the cost of LED screens have come down, how the cost of laptops and computers have come down over years. So tapping into renewable resources is all about technology. But when it comes to tapping into natural, non-renewable sources, the more you consume, the prices go up. So be it oil, be it nuclear energy, be it coal, as the consumption increase, the demand increases and the prices go up. So this is the underlying principle. So as we scale up, so if you see till about 3 years ago, per unit cost of solar energy was bidded at around 5 rupees and even 6 rupees. But today the cost of per unit solar power is being bidded at 2.3 rupees. So in the past 5 years, it has come down by almost 50%. So, and if you see the example of countries like Germany, where they do not, they used to depend largely on nuclear power, nuclear energy. Now they are phasing out nuclear power plants because A, it is not safe. B, it's because as their consumption of from renewable energies is increasing, the cost of production is also decreasing. Last year, in few of the months, Germany has met 100% of their energy demands from only renewable sources. They have a sea line, so they depend. They do not have. They're not blessed with as much sunlight as countries like India, so they depend on wind energy. So yes, definitely. And if you see India's production of renewable energy sources has been growing in leaps and bounds. So and without any subsidies, we are able to match the price of thermal energy right now. And thermal energy, we get it at a certain price which we think is cheap because of a lot of government subsidies. So that is an indirect cost which we are ourselves are picking up, right? So the idea that renewable energies are expensive is a thing of the past when the technology was new, but right now the technology is improving at such a rate, and very soon, now the only hurdle for renewable energies right now is battery technology, and battery prices also in the past years have reduced by more than half, and it is just a matter of couple of years or maybe 5 years when batteries can be scaled up to a huge level, then our dependency on non-renewable sources can totally become zero. So the technology is growing, and as technology is being implemented, it's becoming cheaper. Right, ma'am. I hope I have answered the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Absolutely.
this is our future. This is our
Yes.
future.
Yeah.
Right, ma'am.
So we have two questions on cradle to cradle concept. So the
Right.
first one says, what about the other environmental impacts when making a cradle to cradle certified product? Like as you were mentioning, like you have clothes and everything. Energy
Yes.
such as water uh, and all are used, and then there are still carbon emissions that takes place. We have
Right.
seen case studies of complete campuses, as you were saying, you know.
Yes.
Yes, as you mentioned, the Jaipur case. So cradle to
Hmm.
cradle is there, but still we do go ahead with carbon emissions and all. So what about that? It does it have its environmental impact again?
Ma'am, definitely. I mean, so this is our basic human nature, and one of the thing about our urban human nature is our activities will produce waste. So, so that is our basic human tendency, and we should not deny that fact. So, by our actions, we can determine how can we reduce it. I will not say that it will be zero, but then in comparison to some other alternative processes, yes, we can reduce the amount of so-called waste that we generate, and we can find out ways how can we make sure this waste or this byproduct can be a resource for something else. So every process there will be certain emission, there will be waste generated, and we are always striving to make it more efficient. So the idea of this is you implement it and suddenly you will have zero emissions, you will have zero waste. No, the idea is to make sure that we will reduce it in every possible way at every possible step. And one thing we have learned from technology is over time technology becomes efficient, but it can never become absolute. Ma'am,
Yes,
I
yes,
guess
sir.
yeah, ma'am.
Yes, yes, sir. So the next question is again on cradle to cradle. It says, uh, do you think a change is required in value motion in urban system to adopt a cradle to cradle concept in production of commodities? Like, you know,
Uh,
people need to acknowledge it, or value motion in urban systems, the way things are now.
Ma'am, it is. I think today we have a choice whether we want to adopt products and technologies and design principles and systems where we can be more conscious. But very soon it will not be a choice anymore. We will not have any choice but to embrace this principles, because if you were to look at the timber industry about 10 years ago, so most of our homes, our doors and windows were made of wood. We used actual tree wood, but now can we afford? I mean, I'm sure most of you are adults, and then must have worked at some building project, so you know what is the cost of real wood. So can we afford it? So it becomes a a default economic option for us. We cannot afford to consume virgin resources anymore. They will not be available anymore. If we want to go on tapping on virgin iron ore, it is not going to be beyond our reach, or at least to make sure that products and services are make economic sense, we will have no other option. So today we are discussing about, is there, is it a viable option? It is. We are not going to have any other option, because honestly speaking, I am not from a construction background, but then recently we were just building a house, and the cost of a wooden door frame, from what I compared to about 15 years ago, is so high. So you depend on different materials. Now you use uh, I think PVC kind of frames, and for our doors and windows. I'm sure you will be better knowing the kind of materials that are
Yes.
available. So one, it's just not about new technology, but we are forced to use the new technology, because tapping into natural resources infinitely is not just sustainable. We can, it doesn't make economic sense anymore.
Right, sir.
Basically, what will happen? You
Yes,
don't
please.
have a chance, and then choice. So the building codes will make you compulse, and then if you wanted to go for your choice or your choice modes, what will happen? You have to pay more taxes, because see, the buildings supposed to be built with economic and energy sense. Now, if you don't produce your, they made in UK, they made mandatory that every house should be 30% energy efficient, and 30% energy supposed to be produced within the house. So now you are already having a 60%. Only 40% you are depending on the government, or you are going for the different materials. And that material, you are using hollow walls, the cavity walls actually conserve the energy. The heat will not go out. So the technology you are using is compulsory. Without you using a cavity wall, the government will not give any permission for you to even construct. So there will be two walls, internal wall, external wall. There will be a cavity. In the cavity, either you use insulation or you use full cavity. If you wanted to go insulation, you have to have 50 mm insulation and then 50 mm cavity. Otherwise, you should leave 100 mm cavity. So in the future, what will happen? The building regulations, the NBC will be changed, and then we neither have an option nor a choice. So it is by regulation we have to go. So there won't be any running here and there. The technology available, and it is adaptable, and it is mandatory. So the mandatory rules will come, and you have to be ready. All the architects are supposed to be ready for the future generation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Ratsit.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, the next question is, this is regarding e-commerce, sir. Daily use e-commerce has become inevitable. Hence, it is the logistic transportation has become more and more transporting even for shorter distances. How do we mitigate this
Yes.
and make energy efficient? How to mitigate GHG and make energy efficient?
Ma'am, some of the companies now, if you take the case of Amazon is right now, they have been trying out delivery through drone technology, and drone technology uses batteries, and if we can, and as our dependency on renewable sources increases, so such changes. And more, if you see in two-wheeler vehicles, which is mostly used by delivery companies, they are also coming out with battery run vehicles. Now you have small and medium level transportation vehicles also being battery run. So the transition is happening, and if you travel to North India, you will see most of the autos that are they run on batteries over there. We don't see so much of that in Hyderabad right now. I think that is because of the local taxes. So, but it is just a matter of time before the taxes are changed and tax systems are changed, and there is going to be more subsidies for e-vehicles. And once e-vehicles are becoming they are becoming a norm by the day. We don't the biggest challenge for e-vehicle electronic vehicles right now is that we do not have the ecosystem. The government is actively working on building the ecosystem. When we say ecosystem, what about the servicing, what about the fueling stations, what about the battery technologies and all? So in the next 5 years, there is going to be a huge surge in investments and technology advancements in the ecosystem for e-vehicles. And once e-vehicles are going to be more visible on the roads, definitely the greenhouse emissions are going to come down drastically. And most of the power supplies for the e-vehicles they are trying to make it in such a way that they get their source from renewable sources. I can one example is in Miapur. There is in the metro station there is a e-vehicle charging point, and on the e-vehicle charging point station the roof is covered by solar panels. Definitely it's not going to supply 100% of the demand, but then now even so solar panels are also the efficiency is being increased. So the efficiency of solar panels is also increasing, so they are also going to be producing more energy in the same amount of time. So as our dependency on e-vehicles is going to increase, I'm sure that even in the transportation sector we are going to see a huge mitigation of climate change. Tesla has recently come out with a prototype of a truck, of a transportation truck, of a 16-wheeler truck that runs on electricity. So that is the first model of a truck. So, and with the speed that technology is advancing, they're expecting in the next 3 years they're going to make those kind of trucks more available on the road. So I think that will be a big change in the transportation and logistics industry to curb greenhouse emission.
Okay. So this one is on, the next question is on e-waste, sir. Is there any policy
but
that we are
basically, sorry to interfere.
Yes, ma'am.
See, we are talking about the e-commerce. So e-commerce, yes, in electronics and other deliveries, fine. But what I suggest and what will be the future of our architects to design is, you produce all your products and goods at your home place. You don't even need any e-commerce. So you have a roof gardens and you have a kitchen gardens, and you have a common gardens whereby you have mangoes and other fruits will be grown. So that is what the future will be. I will surely share one video. Then at the end you can display, and they are called circular, like a circular economy, circular housing. So they will park at a common point. They don't even enter the house with the car, and from there either they walk or they use electric cars, or like our palace where we only use the horses, the carts, whereby there is no electricity at all. You don't even need a battery for the horse-driven carts. So that is what the future will be. Anyhow, we will go back to rock age again.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Coming to the question, Joel, sir. So this is on e-waste. Is there any policy at current that is working towards that circular economy for e-waste in India? Like, is it something that the government or at a consultancy level or at any levels, something working out?
Ma'am, so this is something I don't think. So for e-waste, there's definitely a policy where waste management companies are required to segregate and make sure that so for example, in Hyderabad, Ramki is the company which is managing the municipal solid waste of Hyderabad. So whatever e-waste that comes into their dump yard or into their collection cycles, they are required to segregate and reprocess it. So one is extract material, repurpose and recycle it. There is a policy. It is not at a public level, but it is for institutions and organizations who are in the waste management business. Secondly, companies are also actively looking at e-waste as resources. So for one example I can give is in India is Chroma is doing it. So if you take your old mobile phone, they take your mobile phone and then they give you a discount on the mobile phone which on your next mobile phone purchase. So your mobile phone may be completely not working, but they take it and they use so Tata what Tata Foundation, what they use doing is they are collecting the e-waste, and this is not just for mobile phones but for any electronic good. So they take it and then they extract minerals from the spoiled goods. Like you have mineral like you have uh, gold is there, copper is there, and then you have lead is there. So all these materials they repurpose from the e-waste and then they supply it to other producers. So in e-waste right now at the consumer level there is no policy. There is no policy at the producer level, but there is a policy at the waste management level. But in other countries there is a seller responsibility clause. A seller responsibility clause makes sure that the seller has a mechanism where once the product's life cycle ends, it returns so that it can be repurposed. So the minerals from the uh, product which is no longer being used can be extracted and it can be repurposed. So we do not have that policy right now in India, ma'am.
Okay.
At a consumer and producer level it's not there, but businesses are understanding that e-waste is a valuable resource. Businesses, because that's purely because of economic sense.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Right, right, sir. So we're done with all the questions, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for answering them with so much of patience, sir. I would like to thank Mr. Joel Sumant for his kind words of wisdom. The session was very informative for giving us knowledge to understand the severity of climate change due to carbon emissions from different modes of transport as well as municipal waste. It was also very nice to hear on cradle to cradle concept and the new Green Deal. We thank you, sir, because you were able to understand it from the various examples and case studies that you were able to share with us. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, ma'am.
sir, for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Raj Reddy garu.
Thanks for accepting our
Thanks a
invitation,
lot, sir.
and
And
in no time you said yes, and
thank you, sir.
we will be in touch. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Ma'am, I want to share a link with you on the chat box.
Yes, ma'am.
This is so you can definitely share it with the participants. It talks about in detail about the different schools of thought in circular economy,
Okay.
which can be and there is a huge scope for design. And since architects, this is what you do, you guys design. So
Right,
I'm
sir.
sure there's a lot of things you can take away from this thing. I'm just sharing a link in the chat box, ma'am.
That's wonderful, sir. Thank you.
Right.
Sure, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you all and stay safe.
Thank
Right.
Yes, sir. Stay safe.
Bye.
Just an announcement for all the participants. We have our next session at 12 in the afternoon. The session is by Sunila Madam, and she'll be speaking on air pollution. So we request all the participants to join in the session by 11:50. So we'll have a quick break, and then we'll see you all at 11:50. Okay, thank you all.